I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. As I mentioned before, Chris Garnjost is going to be late. So I have a couple of changes to our agenda for this evening. I know some people are not going to like it, but to them, I apologize. We will be taking a break for an executive session at 6:45 this evening, and we will, that's pertaining to a legal matter. And then we will return from executive session at approximately 7:30. So that's the first change to the agenda. The second change is that we need to add another item to the agenda under voting in the new treasurer, and that is payments for summer work. So those are the additions and corrections to the agenda. Public participation for items not related to this agenda. Does anybody have something they'd like to have addressed at this time? Okay, seeing none. The next item on the agenda is announcements and celebratory comments from board members. Well, I think the announcement is that, oh, hold on.
Hold on, we'll see if we can get somebody in here.
The announcement is that we have a new board member to add today. And that's, oddly enough, also our first action item is to, I'll take to introduce Rebecca Roisman, who the board members have already met. I will take a motion to appoint Rebecca Roisman. Well, first, I'd like to ask Rebecca if she has something that she'd like to say.
She did not prepare a speech, I bet.
Okay. I'll take a motion to appoint Rebecca Roisman to the Mount Escutney School District's board.
So moved.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, who?
Amy did. Amy and Nancy second.
Okay. Okay, hold on. There's somebody waiting to get in. Okay. All those in favor of appointing or adding Rebecca Roisman to the Mount Escutney School District's board, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all those opposed? The ayes have it. And welcome to our board, Rebecca. We're so glad to have you with us. I think you're going to make a nice addition to our dynamic.
So Elizabeth, do you want to just explain that I don't think that Rebecca's been sworn in yet, right? So she'll be participating, right, but not voting, correct?
That's right. Rebecca, you still have to be sworn in by Amy, who can't do it tonight because she has to do it in person. But to do that, you go down to the town hall and she'll swear you in. And then after that, you'll be able to vote. Right now, you're a member, but a non-voting member. Okay. And I sent out an email earlier advising everyone of your new email address. And that. Did I forget anything, David?
No, I think that's it. Rebecca's a longtime resident of Windsor, and she's been in social work and counseling and school work mostly across the river in New Hampshire. But she's got a great background, and we all welcome her to this board.
Okay, so we'll try to, the next item on our agenda is that Sherry Greeley had to resign as treasurer for our board, and we need to appoint a new treasurer as soon as possible. Does anybody wish to be appointed treasurer for our board? Now, it doesn't have to be a board, obviously, since Sherry wasn't on the board. It doesn't have to be a board member who does that, right, David?
That's correct. That's correct. It does have to be a Windsor resident. That's correct, right, Amy? Or a Windsor or West Windsor.
It just has to be a resident of the Mount Escutney School District.
School district, right? Either one, yeah.
What does it entail?
I think it's mostly just looking over the warrants one more time, signing checks. It's that's about it, because most of the financial action and approvals happen at this board level. But it's just, one more set of eyes to look over the invoices, warrants, and sign the checks. And a matter of fact, I think the check signing is now done electronically. So I think there's a way to do it without even having to come to the office, but I can't promise you that, but I think that's possible.
Nancy, do you want to do it?
Oh, I wasn't thinking. I have done the warrant work, the signing. If it's not that, is it like once a month you go in and check everything?
Yeah, pretty much. That's, yeah. I think I think they pay twice a month, but the warrants.
Yeah, it's probably every 2 weeks, like the SU treasurer.
Yeah.
To go in and sign checks and such.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, and you've got good contact with Gail in the office and Tina and Ed, so yeah, they'll let you know when to come in.
Fine. I did that for ABS. So that's fine.
So you want to do it, Nancy?
Surely, I'll do that.
Okay, I'll take a motion to appoint Nancy Pedrick as treasurer for our district.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor of appointing Nancy as our district's treasurer, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, who said aye?
Everybody. I did not vote.
So that's 4-0, I think, since we don't have Chris.
And since Rebecca can't vote, that's what I was wondering. Okay. All right. For those of you who are reporters waiting for some sort of announcement, please be advised that there will be no announcement that I think you're looking for this evening. So if you'd like to continue with our meeting this evening, you're more than welcome to. We welcome everybody being here. But if you're waiting for some sort of announcement, it's not happening tonight.
Could I ask when this announcement will most likely be made?
No.
No. Okay.
Sorry.
He can ask it. Can you answer it?
You can't answer it.
I cannot answer. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
I'll keep you posted though, Al.
We'll keep you
Okay.
posted if that should change or when that should change. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The next item on our agenda is, let's see.
Student representation.
On the board. Let's go ahead and just have an update on that if we can. Except the principals aren't on here, are they?
No, why don't we hold that till they get on at 7:30? Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What's the next thing?
Budget process?
Well, yeah, okay. We talk about the budget process. That is simply that I wanted to have a brief discussion, and I think we can do it in under 4 minutes. Just stating clearly that I think that the budget should be tied to the strategic plan and portrait of a graduate that we've worked so very hard to complete. And so I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I just wanted to state that for the record, that I hope that the budget process and the budget as it's presented to us and as we discuss it includes the strategic plan.
Elizabeth, I am all in favor of that, to have more meaning and understanding of our goals and values with our budget, and showing that we do support our strategic plan, that there's a tie-in. It makes complete sense.
I think it also will be much easier to explain the budget to people who are paying for the budget, that if we make investments, that the investments are actually tied to short, medium, and long-term goals. So as you all know, I've been waiting for this moment. So I'm glad that you feel that way as well.
Yeah, and just for the public that are here, just to bring everybody up to date, we finished the actual portrait of a graduate almost a year ago, but then this last spring and through the summer, we worked on the strategic plan that'll be tied to that portrait and those 5 competencies that we want every single graduate of our high school to have when they leave. And we are just beginning to vet that design now, or that strategic plan now. I don't suspect it's going to change much because an awful lot of input went into it. It was written by a pretty significant team of people who provide leadership in our supervisory union, including 2 or 3 of the board chairs. So in that strategic plan are 5 goals. We won't go over it tonight, but I think that would be a good idea to keep those goals in mind as we go about the budget process. I know that we could next month. I'm hoping by next month. Well, let's back up. While we're talking about the budget process, I'm hoping by the end of this month that we'll have a draft of the supervisory union budget. Ed's trying hard to pull that off. By the end of October, we have a supervisory union meeting the end of October. You know that's a big part of our budget, because that affects our assessment. Obviously, all 3 districts pay an assessment to the supervisory union. I will say that Katie Ahern did finish the service plan, which is the special education plan for next year. That's a huge task, and it's also a big part of our budget. So we hope to do that in October. So I think by November, and I know Colleen and Kate are not on here, but there is a meeting coming up soon with Jennifer, Colleen, and Kate to start to draft out a budget that we could bring to this board by the first meeting in November. And then I think we could begin to match that against the strategic plan. I think that was the plan of the principals anyhow. And then this board could decide what else you wanted to do from that point on to solidify that budget. As Ed pointed out to the Wethersfield School Board last night, a lot of times the best laid plans of mice and men are also, in a way, at the beck and call of the tax rate. And this year in particular, there are going to be some areas that will perhaps be at the hands of the legislators, because, as you know, our tax rate is based on a lot of things that we don't decide, including the common level of appraisal, per pupil block count, the yield. And it would be my guess that the legislature this year, given the COVID requirements and some of the monies that have been, promised, that they're going to be trying to do as harmless as they can pieces, including they already took on the ADM of the average daily membership and held that constant. So anyway, I won't go on any longer than that, other than to say, I think that's a great plan. It's a long and tedious process for those who haven't taken part in the budget process, but I think we've got a great board and a great community, and I think we're ready. We'll be ready to go here pretty soon.
Well, I guess the thing that I really wanted to say was that I hope the budget process this year doesn't look like years past, in which each cell on the spreadsheet is increased incrementally. That's all. And so now I'll take a motion to, just as a reminder, we are going to enter executive session now, and we will exit executive session at approximately 7:30. So I'll take a motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Second.
That's Nancy and Bill seconded.
All those in favor of entering executive session, please indicate by saying aye.
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 So Elizabeth, am I correct? I mean, certainly Wendy, we don't need minutes taken during this part of the meeting. I would assume everyone will leave the meeting, and they should be back about what time, Elizabeth, if they want?
7:30.
7:30. Okay, so people will sign back on at 7:30, and then we'll continue the public portion of the meeting at that time.
So where we left off was student representation on the board.
Yeah, we waited till you were all on to talk about that.
Wait, hold on a second, David.
Somebody trying to get in?
No, is Wendy back on yet?
Wendy is back on.
Okay, there she is. I see her.
Wendy is back on, and
Okay.
Wendy, just so you know, Chris Garnjos moved to take us out of executive session, and Nancy seconded that, and they voted unanimously to come out of executive session. So now we start the public meeting again.
And in that case, the unanimous is a 5-0.
Now, that was actually a 6-0, because
No,
Rebecca.
that was not.
Oh, that's right, 5-0.
Yeah.
Right, because Rebecca's not voting. That's correct.
So where we were was talking about student representation on the board. Have either of you or any of the three of you been able to follow up with seeking interest or student representation on the board?
Colleen invited students to come tonight,
Uh-huh.
but it got a little wonky because of the change of the time. So, Colleen, do you know where we're at?
I did not get an email back from our advisors, but our student council advisors thought that we were going to have representation, but I didn't get a name yet. So we'll definitely follow up with you, Elizabeth, as soon as I get the names.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And my understanding in talking to Kate and Colleen was that they felt, the best way to do this, at least initially, was to go through the student leadership that's already existing and then have them decide who might at least initially represent the students. So that's why we did it that way. Stay tuned.
Okay. The next item wedged in there is payments for summer work.
Right, because we added that to the agenda.
Yep.
And I hold on a second. Yeah. So I sent the board just before the meeting an email that indicated I've met with all three administrators who worked this summer, starting pretty much right as soon as school got out, you know, June 8th, 9th, 10th, whatever that was, whenever we were done with school. And one of the people involved, Jennifer, was contracted as a year-round employee till July 1. So I've talked with Jennifer and with and gotten a readout or a spreadsheet of the days that she worked. I did the same thing with Colleen and Kate, and I do have the amounts of money that I feel per diem were owed, because all of them starting July 1 were 210-day employees. So they were not year-round employees, and they did not take a vacation. They worked every single day of the summer, reporting out for Jen 20 days, because we didn't count the June days with her, and then 25 days for Kate and Colleen. So the amounts for the record, Wendy, you can put these amounts in the minutes. Jennifer would get additional pay of $8,345. Kate would get additional pay of $8,928. And Colleen would get a pay of $9,625. And a part of it is because the difference in the per diem rate, and also adding the extra 5 days for June to Kate and Colleen. And that also allows them to put some of their 210 days into this year, because they will be working through February vacation, April vacation, Thanksgiving vacation, you know, and they'll account. I think in Jennifer's case, there were about an additional 13 days that she can allocate to the rest of this year on top of her contracted time. And I think it was close to that same amount for Colleen and Kate. So I think what we would need from the board is just a motion to authorize those payments to the 3 administrators. And I would completely support that. There was not a lot of time off this summer. And again, they were not contracted for all those days. I also I think I put in my email, and I've told Ed that I think we could easily consider these payments as part of our COVID or CARES Act money, because really what we did is we repurposed these folks. We could probably almost justify that for every principal in the district, because what they would normally do in the summer is take a couple of weeks, 3 weeks vacation. We'd probably have a retreat. None of that happened. It was daily work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night some days. So I think it's a fair way to treat the 3 administrators in the Mount Scottney School District.
So moved.
I think we need to actually have the motion given by.
Sorry, I'll take a motion to authorize payment for summer work for each of the 3 building leaders.
So
And I think, and Wendy has those amounts, so that can be reflected in the minutes.
I'll second.
Before we vote, it was my understanding that these 3 worked every day this summer. I'm not really sure how 20 days winds up being the amount that they worked.
Well, I can certainly send you the spreadsheets, Elizabeth, but essentially what you have to look at, I mean, there were about anywhere from 33 to 35 days, but you got to remember that they got paid more than the 184 contracted days for, teachers and students. They have 210 days, right? Which is, so in other words, there are already more days allocated to work, and some of those, could be included in that summer work. Some of those can be included in extending, into the year. I mean, I think what's important, and I think the 3 administrators would say this, that they all felt that given their contracts and given the number of days that they are contracted to work, this seemed fair.
Okay. All those in favor of authorizing the expenditure of the money for the extra day's work this summer for the 3 building leaders, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Very definitely aye.
Yeah.
All those opposed? Anyone? Okay.
Sorry.
That's 5-0.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is, sorry, bear with me. Oh, the next item on the agenda is the transportation follow-up.
Yeah, so
That's on you, David.
yeah, right. We have since had another meeting with Student Transportation of Vermont because we have to certainly continue to, rearrange routes to accommodate. I think finally after this last meeting, I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, can we mute some mics? I got some
Yeah,
feedback.
we might have too many mics on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there was an understanding after that last meeting that they have to really treat us as a single district, and they have to be able to work out for us transportation to and from, each of the buildings, especially for those students who are graduating from the 6th grade, and then now no longer by choice, but by merger agreement attending the Windsor High School. And I think, Ed was at that meeting. I think they completely understood that. They've made some additional adjustments. I haven't in the last few weeks heard of any major complaints. I do know that the other issue here is that, and this was part of our conversation, but not necessarily what I was tasked with. But my understanding is because of the remote days that we're going to be having here soon, and we've already had one last Friday, what's considered a remote day, and we've got some spread out over the course of the year. They agreed, first of all, we're going to be doing some food delivery on those days. But secondly, they are going to adjust. The invoices are going to reflect when they don't transport. So they're going to give us credit back for days and runs that aren't actually taken. So I think that's going to help us out in the end too. I think we're going to end up saving a little bit money. But we've been happy with the drivers. They were short a driver. That driver's now back. But and we're happy with the company. They seem to serve us well. I don't know if there are any other specific questions or concerns. I know that Jennifer and Colleen and Kate and Wendy, actually, because Wendy serves as, among other things in the district, she's the transportation coordinator for the Mount Scottney School District, and I think she has a good relationship with Mike, the director of transportation at Transportation of Vermont, and I think we've got a good system set up right now. I don't know. It's going to change again if we start to extend the day. It's going to change again if we, if we ever get back to full time. But I think we can make this work.
Thank you. I appreciate your update. The next item on our agenda is the Student Resource Officer Memorandum of Agreement.
I'm gonna pull that up, Elizabeth.
Okay. Well, don't. I don't, because
okay.
No, because there are a few problems with it that will preclude us from really being able to discuss it this evening.
Okay, that's fine.
It does not include even mention of West Windsor, which is the whole purpose of creating a new contract. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that we have previously gotten our any police services West Windsor has gotten through our contract between West Windsor and the Windsor Police Department. So that has to be worked out as well. So my suggestion was going to be that we invite whoever was planning to sign this contract to attend our next meeting so we can talk through some of these details and not just be okay.
Yeah, and
because those contracts need to be coordinated. I'm planning to attend the next West Windsor Select Board meeting so that I can talk with them about changing the West Windsor contract with their police. They're in, or West Windsor is in year one of a 2-year contract currently. And so we would have to come up with some sort of rider for the second year of the West Windsor contract. So that was that.
and was there a place in here where you thought something should be mentioned about West Windsor? I mean, basically, the header is the town of Windsor and the Mount Scottney School District agree to the implementation of school-related police services. So wouldn't that, the Mount Scottney School District is is Albert Bridge and Windsor. I was a little confused when you said that, but.
Well, I guess I am therefore a little confused because I can't really understand from this contract whether it means that there's going to be police inside the building each and every day. And if that's the case, then how is that going to happen with 2 buildings, number one? And number 2, is that really necessary? Number 3, it doesn't define police weaponry and whether it's necessary to bring police weaponry into a school.
No, it's all in there, Elizabeth, if you look at it carefully. I mean,
I did look at it carefully. It said that it would be less, didn't define what the weapons were.
Well, it says the SRO's uniform of the day, right?
Yep.
Which will include, but shall include a department badge, firearms, and less lethal weapons. I mean, it says it right in there. Now, if you disagree with that, then we can have that conversation, but it clearly states.
I do disagree with that. I don't think that we need to have firearms inside a school. But I'm not the only member of this board.
That's right. We'll have to talk about that because I know we had this very healthy conversation in Heartland when as a matter of fact, this contract is modeled after the Heartland contract. And Windsor, at least this was now a while ago, they won't do it if their officer can't be armed. So that would be a different kind of conversation, but I think it's pretty clearly spelled out in here. It's just that we may need to have a meeting or invite them to the board meeting for other reasons than, I mean, if we want to change this, we can change it. But I just want to be careful that I think both schools are covered. It talks about being in the schools during the hours of 7:45 to 2:45, Monday through Friday. And, you can go right on down. But I do think if we have concerns about, weaponry, then that's a whole different topic.
I think it should specify that if there's going to be a police officer in the school, that it should be both schools, because I think that Albert Bridge gets left out a lot of this type of service. Mm-hmm. If this is what we want. And so I guess that is really the other question. I think do any of the other board members have anything that they'd like to say about it?
I would. I can't imagine a police officer in Albert Bridge every single day. And I wonder, has that happened in the high school? Is that how it's working now?
I
Colleen
can speak to that.
Yeah, Colleen can speak to that.
Yeah, for the last couple of years, I can't remember how long Officer Favreau's been with us, but we've had an office in our building for him. And that's understanding is that he goes to all 4 schools as needed and tries to check in. I don't know how often he's at the other schools, but I know he's not at our school full time, but I would say 2 to 3 times a week he's in the school. And at the beginning of this school year, we asked him to support us with the morning check-ins and the traffic in our parking lots and those kind of areas that can jam up, and helping our student drivers coming in and out. That's what we talked about this year so far. But he's always been kind of an on-call person if we needed him and support in any way. So he's not with us every day, but he is a presence that I think we try to make a positive relationship with our students and Officer Favreau. And that seems to work well for us.
How about Jen at West Windsor? Does he make appearances there, Jen?
So far this year, we've called him in once and he stopped in once.
Okay.
That I know of.
He stopped in one time of his own volition, or he stopped in that time that you called him?
Two times he's been there. One that he stopped in on his own, and one that we called him in. And the time he stopped in on his own, he was told he couldn't come in because it was right at the start, and our nurse said he can't come in. Yeah.
Was at the beginning of the year? Yeah. So I think my point, Elizabeth, is this is really more of a different discussion. I think it does impact the contract. Don't get me wrong. I agree with this, but it's really what type of presence do we want to have in each of those buildings? Remember, it's a shared service. I imagine his total salary is about $90,000, of which we're paying about $46,000. Heartland pays another, I think, $34,000 or $35,000, and then because of size, and then Windsor also maintains a share of his time because he does also provide police services for the town of Windsor as needed. But I do think I agree completely that it's been the expectation around his duties in the buildings, when he should be in the buildings, how often he should be in the buildings, what he should be doing while he's in the buildings. I agree that has not always been that clear. And maybe that's part of what we need to get clear. And I don't know if we need to do that at the board level, but I think it would be good maybe for Kate and Colleen and Jennifer and I to start that conversation with both Office of Favreau and Tom Marsh, the town manager, and just see, what are the needs? What would we like to see? Because as Jennifer said, he's been in the building only once on his own volition at the beginning of the year. The question is, does the district, want him there for any regular period of time? I guess it's a question of use. And I think we can have that conversation with them. I'd like to hear from the board, though. What would you like to see? I heard Elizabeth say what she would not like to see when he is in the buildings, but I don't know what the board would like to see in terms of, he's a very kid-friendly person, and he's built good relationships with many of our students in Heartland and Windsor, and I know Jennifer has used it in West Windsor in tricky cases. But what would we like to see from them?
Nancy?
Well, first of all, what I'm gathering is that between or among all the districts, we're paying his whole salary. And I just don't know if we need a presence like that. And Windsor's right 15 minutes away, and is closer to the high school, the police station. Do we need an officer? Do we need this expenditure? I just don't know. I kind of think I would prefer not to, and just call him as needed.
So we, as a school district, are not paying his whole salary. We're only paying a portion of it. Heartland is paying some, and then the town of Windsor is, because he is a Windsor police officer.
So if we're paying 46 and Heartland's paying 30 something, that's almost his entire salary, isn't it? Or is his whole salary 90,000?
I think it's somewhere between 90 and 100,000 with benefits, because remember, it's salary and benefits, but because the town invoices us. And I think, as I recall, the breakout is, I think it was 50% or slightly under that, maybe 45% for Mount Ascutney. And then I think it was about 30% and 30% for the town in Heartland. Now, that's a good question. I mean, are we, do we need him that much time? Do we want him available that much time?
To me, it doesn't seem as if the high school sees him 2 or 3 days, and if Jennifer hardly ever sees him, I don't know. It seems like we're paying for more than we're getting, and I don't know if we need it. So those are both my questions.
I think those are great questions.
I think it would be helpful to maybe have our school resource officer maybe come to a meeting, or maybe Chief Sampson or something, to explain what their role is and what what he does when he is in the schools. And maybe our administrators should also talk with him about spending time in all of the buildings, because I'm not sure, like Elizabeth was saying, that might not have been completely explained. And it could be that when he was turned away, when he first came on his own, that he said, well, okay, and decided to only go there when asked. And everyone has to know what the expectations are before anyone can be responsible to meet them.
Yeah, this position it's really morphed. I think it is time for this conversation. Remember, we really discovered last year that we hadn't really updated this contract or had this conversation since we had contracted under the original agreement about 4 years ago. So I think this is a timely discussion, and the role of the resource officer has changed dramatically. When we first engaged with a resource officer, we had a very different personality who was in the buildings constantly, and that really worked. That person then took another job in Norwich as a chief of the Norwich Police, and then we hired Paul. But I think it may be time for a meeting with Chief Sampson. But I think what I want to make sure of, though, and we don't have to spend an hour tonight doing this, but I think we have to be clear about what we want. Do we want a regular presence in the building? And how much time would we like per week of the officer in the building? And then we can decide too, or certainly the administrators can decide, what's the best use of his time when he is in that building. Because if we don't need the service, then maybe we don't need the service. I mean, we do have an on-call police department. Windsor and West Windsor both use the Windsor Police Department. But I think that's the discussion we've got to have as a board, so that we're not just sort of thinking it out in front of Chief Sampson. I mean, Do we want an officer in our buildings on a regular basis? I think that's a really good question.
I think we need to, I think it's a discussion for the board, but it's also a discussion for the administration. Before that, the SRO over the years, and it goes back before the last 4 years, it goes back a lot further than that. And we've had some very good SROs. We've had some okay SROs. And I think certainly the climate has changed a little bit in our school, but I think there's still value. The question is what the function is. If it's less time in the building, does that serve the function that we wanted to accomplish? I think there's value in creating a relationship with the law enforcement in our town, rather than just having it show up when we've got a crisis. It establishes it creates a different atmosphere. There's no question about that. And in the past, it's been a positive value in our school. But I think everybody on the administration side needs to first get clear that that's what they think is a valuable thing, and I want to know what they think at this point. And I don't want to know now, just because we can go on and on this. But I would say, if we are going to continue this, what are we going to continue this for? Because just having him show up in the building every once in a while and walk around is not the function of an SRO.
Well,
we can get that to happen by just having the current cop on the policeman on patrol walk through the building every once in a while. That would not necessarily require a contract for an SRO, and an SRO gets special training for this process. There are other things that they're supposed to be doing. So I would say that we need to look at that first.
Yeah, that's correct.
Does anybody else want to weigh in?
I'd just like to add that Officer Favreau also supports the truancy protocols and home visits and setting up coordinated service plan meetings when there's a truancy issue, and he files the reports with the state's attorney. I appreciate when he is needed when there are, I would say, like, student drivers is a good example of places where we have young people doing more mature things as they become drivers and need reminders on campus. And it's a more teachable moment rather than more of a police officer in town finding that student doing something that might not be appropriate. So those teachable moments are very important as his role as the SRO, and a lot of support in the truancy protocols. So I just wanted to add those two.
Yeah, I can also add, just in the past, I mean, we just started this year and we did kick him out. So in all fairness, but you know, when we've had school resource officers who come to our school on a regular basis to touch base with kids, talk about, you know, sort of integrating our goals for kindness, you know, caring, responsibility, those kinds of things. I will tell you one story of a kid who thought his parents were gone when he woke up in the morning and freaked out, called 911, saw the resource officer, jumped in her arms. You know, and that's a good example from an elementary perspective of the power of having somebody, you know, show up in a uniform that's familiar to you. And so I think there's some value in that.
Kate?
I didn't know if you could
I didn't
everybody.
just say for clarity's sake, and this has been true the whole time we've had an SRO, is that they're never used in discipline issues at all. Like, as Colleen said, like, they act on teachable moments, but we don't access them if we have a discipline issue. They're never used as a threat or a force. They're strictly what Chris has said, which has been invaluable in Windsor as we've had it through the years, to promote the relationships between officers and the community. I would say I've seen it over the years that it's working. That, you know, kids identify a police officer as someone who's there to help. And I've seen him this year have difficult conversations with some of our high school students who've had a lot to say about police brutality, you know, and he's talked to them about his career and the type of police officer he is and how things work out. So I think that, Chris, your idea of what the intention is pretty dead on. Amy?
Yeah, and I think it's important for kids to have a relationship with police officers other than being arrested, you know, and also for police officers to understand kids, you know, to build that relationship.
Nancy?
Yeah, thanks. I'm really, that's the kind of thing I really needed to hear. I didn't know what he did, but I also really feel if we're all paying him, that the conversation has to be made as where you're going to be and how many hours is he actually there? Because I don't like just paying a person and not having them. I don't know where he is or what he's doing, and that's my only thing, is that it has to be really clear that if we're paying for him for a full 5 days a week, he should be visible 5 days a week someplace.
And I feel that, and this isn't part of the contract, but I think parents should be able to opt out of, at least be given the choice of opting out of having kind of,
Interaction.
In the right word, not interaction, but I can't find the right word. I'm sorry. Well,
That's okay.
I think parents should be given the option of opting out. I don't think that all parents agree with it being healthy for their children to have a friendly relationship with police officers. And if they feel that way, they should know that today Officer Friendly is coming to the school and is going to fingerprint all of the kids today, so that the kids think that having their fingerprints done is a fun thing. Not all parents think that's, and they should be given a choice. That's all I'm saying. But that's not part of the police contract.
No, but I mean, I think it's a good example, because it could be that, you know, there might be a lesson in civics on fingerprinting or the nature of arrest and the law, and oftentimes he might be wrapped into that lesson, and who knows, maybe he might demonstrate how to fingerprint or not, you know. So that's not a crazy example, Elizabeth. I don't know that that's ever happened, but I see it as a possible example. We have had some families in the past who have, when we've offered to have him speak with the family and or the child, have asked not to have that happen. We always, at least my understanding is, we've always given parents that choice to opt out, and some of them have.
I don't think we have. I think we have, when parents have requested to know when that's going to happen, they've requested to be able to opt out, but they haven't always automatically been informed that that's taking place without seeking out the information. So anyway, let's move on.
Well, Wendy has a question. And
Yep.
Sorry. Yes, Wendy?
I just wanted to say, as a parent, I have 3 kids in the school, so I can tell you that the SRO has been used in education and of health classes about the influence, the effect of alcohol on the body. And there have been some curriculum to that. And I, as a parent, have been asked every single time if I would like my child to be included in that curriculum or not. So I have been given that option to opt out. As a general point, my son is a cadet, so SRO is certainly something I'm passionate about. So I think it's incredibly important that there should be some structure and clarity about what the expectations are as far as their presence or not you know, from a scheduling standpoint. Paul is a wonderful man and brings so many good things to the table. But I think at the same time, if we're paying a very large portion of his salary, then we should be getting something in return. And not that we're not, but I think it would be better for him, better for the school, and all the way around, that everyone is clear about what they're getting. But I definitely think there's a great role for an SRO in our school building. I think it's a valuable asset that should maintain.
So just two things if we're going to come to a close here. I want to go back to what Chris said. I think Chris is absolutely right that probably those discussions should happen first at the administrative level around what's working now, what's not working, you know, what we want to do, you know, moving forward, and what kinds of recommendations do we want to bring to the board. This is, by the way, the right time to be talking about this, because we're entering into budget season. And if we end up feeling that you know, that the what we're paying is not worth what we're getting, then this should be the time to make those adjustments. So it certainly is, it's timely. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, as we move forward, I just want to get clear that once we have that conversation, you know, what would be the next step? Do you want us, you know, we don't have a signed contract right now, so quite frankly, you know, we could make any kind of changes we want to make. But do you want us to bring back recommendations for time structure and what the day might look like and some of the duties he might perform? Is that what you want?
Yes, and also I would like him to come,
Yeah.
or
Well, the chief too. Yeah.
the chief, just to work out some of the contractual details. I'd like for them to come.
Yeah, we can easily do that. And by the way, that's exactly, not to compare, but that's exactly what happened in Heartland. Chief Sampson came out, met with the board, talked about possible duties and responsibilities. That's when the issue of carrying a weapon came up, and Chief Sampson was very clear about the parameters by which Windsor Police Department would partake in this service. But I think we can have those same conversations with Chief Sampson and with Officer Favreau. And I think Tom Marsh came too, just because, you know, they all answer to each other. And the only last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, but this is my 9th year. We've got to understand, we've got to put this in the context of the history. The first 3 years that I was here, we did not have an SRO at all. And in fact, what happened, we weren't merged at that time. What happened was just what was explained. Sometimes an officer would stop by and say hi to the principal and blah, blah, blah. And it worked very informally. And then at the end of my 3rd year, going into my 4th year, there were these, they reinvented these COPS grants, you know, where you could get money to, in fact, help support an SRO in the building. And what happened is, year 1, you got 90% of reimbursement through this grant. Year 2, you got like 50%. Year 3, 25%. And year 4, you were done. You had to either support the SRO on your own, or the SRO had to go away. So we're in year 6 now of that progression. And so for 2 years, we've been paying, you know, our lion's share according to Windsor of his time, but that's negotiable. And we can talk about that once we decide what we want him to do.
I feel we should move on. The next item on our agenda is Black Lives Matter and other symbols used to create a safe space. And I've invited Chris Long to be here. He has something that he'd like to read.
That was close. Chris Lord, actually.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Chris Lord.
That's all right.
Because your email signature is Chris L. So I apologize.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, your volume is on, Chris.
Okay. I get super nervous talking to people, so if I can write something out, I'm always better off. So I wrote something. Hopefully, I feel like it says everything I wanted to say, and I guess we'll go with that. I wish this wasn't something that required any explanation or a need to defend, but that I'm here at all speaks clearly as to why these messages are vital, and I thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I'm not here to discuss or debate the Black Lives Matter movement or the LGBT rights movement. I'm not here to debate the meaning of either flag in the larger context of our country. I'm here to explain why I have them in my classroom and why I've had similar messages on my classroom walls since I started teaching 25 years ago. I work to be a voice for all of our students, but these flags speak to where I see the greatest and most immediate need for our advocacy. They are not about exclusion, but about putting the focus where there is a necessity. They are not statements about white or straight people, and they are not accusatory or meant to lay blame. Both flags are meant to amplify a message of civil rights and social justice, and the voices that are frequently unheard, ignored, silenced, or ridiculed, even here in our schools. They are meant to ask how we can do better. What do we have in place as a school district to support our students and families of color? How do we provide support for our LGBTQ students? And in what ways do we seek out those crucial voices? My intent is to send a clear, and based on the deliberate size of the flags, loud message that my classroom is a safe space for our LGBTQ students and students of color. Why? I hear racist and homophobic slurs, as well as the mocking of different ethnic and cultural groups on a regular basis. In a class last year, a few students made the statement that the Civil War and slavery had ended 200 years ago, and that Black people should stop complaining and get over it. And when discussing a gay character in a novel, it isn't uncommon to hear that's gross. These comments very clearly send the message that the lives of our LGBTQ students and staff and students of color don't matter. Both flags say that they do. They are meant to spark discussion and to help provide our students with a greater understanding of history and current social issues. They are also part of supporting a more inclusive, diverse, and anti-racist curriculum. So why Black Lives Matter and LGBTQ pride flags? They are about building awareness of the immediacy in not only our country and state, but also in our school district. While there will always be exceptions, white and heterosexual students and staff aren't discriminated against, isolated, harassed, ridiculed, bullied, or marginalized because of their race or sexual or gender identity. White and heterosexual students will be presented with a curriculum that will teach them about their history, will include characters and novels that they can identify with, and they will see themselves represented fully and respectfully in discussions of current events. When studying history, literature, or current events, subjects that often address issues of race, white students will be surrounded almost entirely by other white students and will never be asked to speak for their race during discussions. White and heterosexual teachers and students will never have their thoughts or behavior viewed through the lens of their race, sexual or gender identity. White and heterosexual students are guaranteed that there will be teachers, administrators, support staff, coaches, and guidance counselors that they can identify with based on race or their sexual or gender identity. Heterosexual students will never hear that they are gross, wrong, not normal, or told that they are dressed wrong. Heterosexual students will always have their correct pronoun used and will never have a teacher or classmate forget or refuse to use it. White student athletes don't have to fear that they will face racist taunts or insults by opposing players and fans during games. Black students have to see political slogans worn by their classmates that represent politicians who have devalued their race on a national stage. Black students have to see the Confederate flag, a symbol of hatred and white supremacy, worn on the clothing of classmates, on the bumper stickers of cars, and flying above houses in their town. But Black Lives Matter flags are labeled controversial and debated publicly. Black students that start driver's ed and begin driving in Vermont will be 2 to 3 times more likely to be stopped by police than their white classmates. LGBTQ teens are more than 3 times likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual classmates, often stemming from harassment, bullying, and a sense of isolation. So this is why I hang the flags, to say that in my classroom and that at Windsor, you do matter. It is not my place to be the voice, but to help create a safe space and a platform to hear from those that are going unheard and to help bring attention to a true need within our schools. Thank you for letting me speak today and for supporting our students. I also want to thank my principals, Kate and Colleen, and for Dr. Baker for their leadership as we move forward. And that's it.
Well done, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Um,
Um,
that was fair. Can you please,
okay.
would you mind emailing that to me and also, well, I'll so I can get it into the record.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So the rest of the board is aware of what prompted Chris being invited to speak. But Kate or Colleen, would you mind describing the situation, or David, and where we stand right now?
Yeah, Colleen or Kate, do you want to say something, or? I mean, I don't.
You mean the situation, Elizabeth, that led Chris to be invited here?
Yeah, right.
So it came to because it's COVID, sometimes we just go to the doorway. Chris's flag is hanging, so you would have to go all the way in his room and walk back out. So we were made aware of it by a parent that it was hanging in his classroom. Then, because we felt, and we've learned a lot, that was a board decision, and we called Christine Bourne and talked to her about how they had handled it at Heartland. We immediately reached out to Elizabeth and asked her if we could get this on the agenda and what if she wanted to do in the meantime. She had told us that she thought we were going to have to ask him to take it down. At that point, we told her that the safe space stickers had been in our building and all over our building probably for 10 years. And she sent us an email right before we were about to meet with Chris and talk to him about it. That said, it's okay, you can let it stay until the board meeting. I've talked to the other board members, and then we told Chris and invited him to come speak here.
Okay, and so board members, and thank you, Kate, because Rebecca's new and she hadn't been informed of all this. So Rebecca, I asked the board members to quickly get back to me as quickly as they could separately, just giving approval to allow the symbols, the flags, to remain in the classroom until this meeting, till we could talk about it. Chris and Bill, I believe, both had some strong feelings about it, about the event. So would you each mind talking about it in the meeting context?
Well, yeah, no problem. My strong feelings wasn't so much about the flag and allowing it, but making sure that the process was followed. That Chris went to the principals went to the to David, and then David would bring it to the board. I just wanted to make sure that the proper protocol was followed. I really don't see it as a board decision, but if it makes people more comfortable, I'd be more than happy to, vote for my approval for these safe places to be in the building. I feel it. So that was my strong feeling, not.
Chris, did you have something that you wanted to add to the discussion?
Sure. Well, I would also say that it wasn't my intention to say that I was against a Black Lives Matter flag, and I'm not. But I asked the question as to whether or not we had policies about any sort of displays of things that have that potential to be questioned as to whether or not they are a political statement or I'm not sure what a social statement. And I was only encouraging us to use the opportunity to take a look at what do we have in place, and do we need to have anything else in place to support these sorts of situations. I'd rather be clear so that so that the administration doesn't have to come to the board every time something like this comes along. And I think it's a challenging balancing act, and it goes beyond the lines of things like the question. It does come up to the question of when does something go from being a social statement to a political statement? And when does something go from being a social statement to potentially a religious statement or something like that? Chris had some really good, powerful things to say about the situation of being a minority person in a very white school situation. And I can't personally speak to that from the standpoint of my own experience, but I can speak to that from my children's experience. And my children are white, but my children are Jewish, and they experience things in school and in other situations. And I'm not about to suggest that Windsor has any more problems than anywhere else. But the challenge of figuring out how to make those safe spaces but how you draw those lines is a very big, difficult question, and I'm not sure. I just want to keep looking at whether or not there's something else that we need to have in place in order to support this stuff. Because I'm for this kind of thing, but I also don't want it to be, well, they have this, then why can't we have this? And where are those lines drawn? And I don't have a problem with the board establishing that this is what we believe in and this is what we support. And then it's up to the people who disagree with the board to say, okay, we don't want you on our board anymore. That's part of the way our system is constructed. But I just wanted to look at it goes beyond just saying, well, do we look at, okay, we've got a Black Lives Matter flag, yes or no? And then we've got a rainbow flag, yes or no? I think there ought to be, I don't know, in some places, everyone has said that the schools have decided that it's safer to not let anything in. And it comes up in that same way that the question of Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and all of those things come up. My children grew up being the two Jewish kids in the elementary school, and having the teacher, in a positive way, and certainly trying to do the right thing, but putting them on the spot to explain what the heck Kwanzaa, what the heck Hanukkah was, and how it worked. And they weren't necessarily real comfortable with that. But, so I can understand how what the situations are, but I'm at this point, I'm still trying to look at what's the best thing to support everybody and to support the people, the students in our school. So
I think that's well said, Chris, and I think that's exactly why it's at this level, because what has been historical proclamations or safe space symbols or social statements have gotten very politicized over the last, sadly, more so over the last several years. But they've become, sort of targets or symbols of something other than what they actually stand for. But that's why we brought it to this level, because I do think that, those symbols, it has to be decided, by the political body that represents the town. Does this reflect, does what Chris just said reflect, the values of this community? And whether it's a school board discussing whether a mascot needs to go or stay, because you're going to hear a lot of conversations in the next several months about mascots in Vermont. Those they're surfacing now again in a strong way. And anytime a school has decided to fly a Black Lives Matter flag in front of their school alongside the American flag, that's been a board decision. So and gotten into some really good community discussion and board discussion. So that's why we decided to bring it up to this level. I also agree that I think we don't have policy on this. We're short on policy, which is another reason why we're here. I don't know whether or not something like this could be included in, you know, our anti-racism task force at the supervisory union level, because that's where our policy is developed now, at the supervisory union level. But I think in the meantime, and by the way, you're not the only district in our SU that's faced this. As Elizabeth said, Heartland had a situation like this just about a month ago, where a couple of teachers wanted to have both the rainbow LGBTQ symbol and the Black Lives Matter symbol on. This was virtual, because when you sign on to a Google Hangout, or there's ways you can put little symbols in the corner, and they wanted to use those symbols, some in the classroom, but also some virtually on their home screens. So Heartland debated this for a little while, less than about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then they took a vote to allow at least specifically those symbols. But I do agree with Chris that raises the issue about, you know, what do we do with the next symbol, or the next religious symbol, or the next, you know, I think that's where you know, policy would help. But I think in the meantime, you know, it would be good for this board to address, you know, Chris's question specifically, but I also know there are other teachers in that building who do post rainbow LGBTQ safe space flags and or the safe space symbols, the BLM symbol or flag. I don't think Chris is the only one. So I think it would be good for this board to.
Yeah, I think, David, part of the reason that boards, at least in Vermont, I am only familiar with Vermont boards, but part of the reason I think that they are the ones who make the decisions about whether to fly the Black Lives Matter flag is so that they can take the heat from the community and support the teachers and students and administrators who are courageous enough to put those symbols up. Yeah. And so I appreciate you seeking board input.
Yeah. I think that's important, because, you know, we could, to Chris's point, we could next week have a student who requests that a Blue Lives Matter flag be put up in the classroom to symbolize support for the police. I've seen the thin blue line. I've seen the Blue Lives Matter, the BLM symbols, and I can tell you, and I don't know how the board feels, but from somebody who has an African-American son-in-law and 2 Black grandchildren, those signs and symbols can sometimes be an affront or offensive to people of color. So I think we just have to have these conversations and make sure that we understand our value systems and how we create safe spaces, and the logic that Chris used was strong around a heterogeneous white male or female, somebody who is clear on their gender and their place in society. But I think the board, we need the weight of the board behind these decisions, because you represent our community.
Just to clarify, David, there's a difference between, there is a difference between being a police officer and being of a different race. Mm-hmm. So one is like, it's part of an identity, but it is a choice. And the other one is part of an identity, which isn't a choice. So I think there's a, you know.
I don't think David was implying that.
No,
David just giving an example.
Well, no, I wasn't implying. I'm sorry if I.
Okay.
No, I know. Yeah, no, I know
What I
exactly.
meant was that if somebody asked to have a thin blue line symbol, it would be different from having a symbol which represented, you know, they're different things.
Right.
So sorry. Yes, Bill.
So I don't mind exploring policy. And I think there's a couple different situations here that come into play. I think what Chris has done is he has posted something within his classroom. That is far different than, not far different, but that's different than, say, having a group of students outside the building posting flags. Now, within a classroom, I'm kind of putting my administrator hat on because I've had, I'm a certified principal and I've had that training. It's really important for us to understand that an educator within their classroom has made those choices based upon their education environment that they're creating. And Chris has a particular a message and environment that he wanted to create within an educational intent. Now, if there's a problem with it, then it's up to the administrators who are trained in educational law to then look at the situation and make their decision. If someone has a problem with their decision, then it goes to the superintendent, and then his training, of course, or her training comes into play based upon their decision is based upon their training. I hesitate to give any sort of power to a policy or to a school board to make those choices without a lot of thought involved. Because really school law is rarely understood by the general public. So I'll leave it at that.
So I guess the question really is, do we really need to take any action here other than to say,
well, I guess my question would be, has Chris has taken it to his administrators, and have they made a decision? That's an actual question for the administrators. So,
Chris, have you taken this to the administrators? Well, we know that Chris took it to, or that the administrators addressed it, okay. And we know that they took it up with David Baker.
Okay, and what would David, what was your decision upon this?
Yeah, and again, it came to me via, as Kate said, via a parent. And it would be, my decision to support those kinds of safe spaces for, the LGBTQ community and our Black and Brown brothers and sisters. So that would be my decision, and I just wanted to make sure that wasn't, that would also have board level support, given the tenor of how some of this stuff gets politicized, and I think I've gotten a sense tonight from the conversation where I think the board stands. I mean, if you don't want to take a formal vote, I mean, that's fine. My feeling is no decision could be a decision. Right.
So I think that should stand. And if any of the community has a problem with David's position, they're welcome to bring it into a school board session, and then we could state our support for David's decision.
Right. Otherwise, we're talking policy, which really should be brought up to the supervisory union and not to us. We don't actually really have any
Policy.
actions that we can take at this time.
I mean, you could easily state to the supervisory union board, probably with Heartland's support, because they've dealt with this too, you know, that maybe we need a policy like this, or this should be part of our task force on anti-racism. You know, I think you have the right to do that, and then we can, you know, we can have that discussion at the supervisory union level. I think absent anything other than that, then we're going to assume that Kate, Colleen, and my decision stands, and Chris can feel safe doing what he's been doing, and we're okay moving forward.
And I'd like to interject really quickly that I thank Chris for coming to the school board meeting and reading your statement and sharing that with us. I appreciate that, and I support what you're doing wholeheartedly.
I'm comfortable with what we've established at this point. I certainly support what Chris is doing as well, and I think that part of it in this case is that it is in a classroom, as Bill said, rather than this is different than students standing outside or a flag on the flagpole, which establishes that this is the school board, the school administration's position as well. We can support people having their own opinions, and we can support our teachers in going about their educational efforts without micromanaging their educational efforts as well. So I'm very comfortable with where we are at this point on this.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Lord, for what you did. I agree with you.
Amy?
Yeah, thank you, Chris Lord, for your statement, because it also helps educate the greater community who might be watching this meeting later or who might be sitting in on that meeting now. And as far as, I think it's important for teachers to feel comfortable having a Black Lives Matter flag or a rainbow flag. And I personally have thought in the last year or two, I've thought to myself, we should have a Black Lives Matter and a rainbow flag out in front of the school. That's just been my feelings. Yes, or I have not brought it up at a school board meeting. However, that has often been on my mind.
Well, I think it's something that we should consider discussing at another time. But for now, for this meeting, Chris Lord, do you feel satisfied with this discussion?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to have a chance to say my piece and just share my thoughts. I mean, this is my fifth year at Windsor, and I've been proud to be a Windsor teacher from, you know, I was really lucky to have been hired 5 years ago, and I still feel lucky, and I think there's work to do. But you could see in heads nod, I've worked at some of them, you know, I've worked at an incredibly progressive school in Maryland. I've worked at more conservative institutions, and the challenges that we're facing in Windsor are no different than the challenges faced at other schools. And, you know, these are not easy.
Chris, do you mind if I
have? Yep.
Sorry, I'm sorry. There seems to be a lag, and I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I was just saying, I mean, I think the challenges that we're facing as a school are the challenges that a lot of schools are facing. My daughter's at Sharon Academy right now, and she's on her school's anti-racism task force, and they're having the same discussions about a Black Lives Matter flag hanging at the school and how the school sort of approaches things. So I think this is something that a lot of schools are tackling, and it's not easy, and it's difficult to do in your community of predominantly white folks. I think we tend to tiptoe through the discussion a little bit because I think we're nervous to have the discussion. But it's one of those things that, you know, it's just crucial that those discussions happen. And, you know, I'm in a classroom today, you know, I'm teaching students of color, and I am teaching students who, you know, a girl today who did a little short writing, and her piece was about, you know, discussing her sexual, you know, her gender identity. And so it's out there with our 7th and 8th graders. I know it's out there in the high school, and, you know, it's just, and speaking, you know, I don't know everyone's name, but, you know, Chris was talking about his children and his son. You know, last year I had to deal with some anti-Semitic comments in class. So, you know, there's things as a school that we're grappling with. And so, yeah, so I'm satisfied. I just want to be part of the work and part of the discussion. And I just felt like hearing a teacher's perspective behind why the flags are up. So.
Thank you ever so much for being with us. Do you mind if I ask you, what do you teach?
Oh, I'm the 7th and 8th grade English teacher at Windsor.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
No. I'm starving. I haven't eaten all day, and I'm starting to get faint and drift towards the left. So I'm going to step out if that's okay, if there's no other questions.
Oh, thanks for your participation.
That's it. Thank you very much.
I'm proud
Nice
that I'm proud that my granddaughter's in your class.
Yeah, great.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully she made the bus today because she didn't want to leave. So that was. Have a good night.
Thanks
Chris. A
lot.
Bye. Okay, the next item on our agenda, I promise we won't go too much longer, is the COVID updates. And so you sent out a nice email to the supervisory union today about the positive diagnosis that was received on Saturday.
Right.
What is the protocol for family members who test positive?
Yeah, so that's the, well, first of all, you know, if the family member is also associated with the school community, then certainly we have the right to ask the family member to be tested before they return, or to certainly quarantine for the full amount of time before they return. So if the family member, like if a staff member has a family member that doesn't work for the school, then I don't think we'd have much to be able to say about that. That would clearly be between the Vermont Department of Health and that family. I think the issue that was addressed over the weekend, and I think we learned a lot from this, was what sort of transparency do we need when we have a positive COVID test? And that's what my communication today was intended to do, that with the weight of the administrative team behind me, I think we decided to make sure that the entire supervisory union knows if we have a staff member who tests positive for COVID, even if that staff member has no connection to either of the other districts. So that's why that letter went out today. But so that's what we'll do from now on. Hopefully we won't have any more, but I'll be surprised if we don't. I think as we move inside, as we get into the flu season, I think, you know, we could get more positive tests. I think the state right now is really wrestling with whether or not, you know, we're at a point where we need to be a little more careful. But, you know, we'll get our direction from the state and from the Vermont Department of Health. They've been great with us. The contact tracing team at the Vermont Department of Health is absolutely incredible. I was on the phone with them all weekend. They were calling different members of this staff member's household, and also colleagues that this person worked with in our district. to determine what type of contact they had with this person, and then they made decisions on quarantining and testing, based on the information they got. So again, we should be proud. Luckily, Vermont's a small state, and they've tasked a lot of people with this contact tracing. The question is, if we have more and more positive tests, as we've seen in the last week or so throughout the state, can they keep up? And right now, they seem to be able to keep up. Right? I mean, that's the key. And so we've.
Just to be clear, this person is asymptomatic. Is that right?
Well, that's a very good question. We determined before the test that both because of exposure, that they may have been exposed to somebody who had tested positive for COVID-19, but also because they were starting to feel fatigued. So actually, we started the quarantining before this person was tested, which really helped out quite a bit. So there were very mild symptoms, but nothing very pronounced. Certainly nothing that would require any level of hospitalization. So that's great. And to the good news, because of a household situation, this person had come in contact with a couple of students that are in the Mount Scottney School District too. Both those students have tested negative, so that's good news. And so we feel that there was due diligence that was done. I think Kate and Colleen responded quickly. Elizabeth Martins, our school nurse, is doing a great job. And by the way, it's not an easy job, because oftentimes when you're told that your child has to stay home because they have a runny nose, or they're feeling a headachy, or they have a slight temperature, we in the past, we haven't done that to parents. And sometimes we tell them they've got to stay home for a while, sometimes 3 days without a symptom, sometimes 24 hours without a symptom, sometimes 7 or 14 days based on the level of symptom. And parents have been very cooperative, but it's not easy. Weathersfield School today, I only know this because we were just talking to Jean Marie, had 22 students out because they were experiencing some symptoms that could be COVID associated. Chances are that all 22, it's got nothing to do with COVID, but our nurses are using algorithm and they quarantine those kids. So that's a credit to our nurses. They've done a great job.
My next question, although I can't find where it was on my next question is, for the building leaders, how's the outdoor program going and how much is it being used?
I would say thanks to the great weather we've been having, our outdoor program is going great. Hats off to our custodial staff who got us tents so we could do our temperature checks on the rainy days. I would say we haven't had any complaints about the heat or bug or everything. Everyone's coming back happy. They're utilizing what we have in our town, particularly Paradise Park. I mean, I'm thrilled that has worked out for us. We've opened up our playground structure, which has been really great news for our younger kids, and our cleaning crew is going out and sanitizing that 5 times a day. I haven't heard anything negative about the outdoor programming at all.
Our teachers go outside regularly. They're not outside the full day, but almost every pod is out regularly.
And yes, we're mostly outside. We start the day inside with a full school morning meeting and breakfast, and then pretty quickly everybody goes outside for most of the time. For us, it's in pretty good shape. We've got a couple of concerns considering particularly hunting season and the fact that we're out and about in our neighborhoods. So we're working on finding solutions to make sure people are aware that we're out and about. But overall, I think it's a real nice opportunity for us to take advantage of a beautiful fall, particularly. And we've got plans to move forward with colder weather.
You do have plans? That's what was going to be my next question.
Yeah, I think teachers that I've spoken to, and certainly the administrators, we live in Vermont and we don't want the cold weather to completely obstruct our abilities to get outside. I think we'll be able to still get outside. And Jen, to your point about hunting season, this may be a total rumor, but my wife told me today that the state had declared that there would be no hunting season this year. Has anybody heard anything about that? No one.
It's already hunting season, David.
My husband was hunting this evening. Just saying.
Yeah, right.
We might have to move if that happens.
That horse has left the gate, David.
I was going to say, when she told me that, I said I would not want to be the person who made that decision in Vermont, because those people have
they'll get shot.
They have lots of guns, and I would not want to be making that. But she was emphatic about it, and I'm gonna do some research on this, but I can't imagine that that's the case.
I sell hunting licenses, so I know the hunting season is happening.
Okay, that's good, Barb. Yeah,
My neighbor got a deer.
that's good. Well, maybe my wife is drinking during the day. I'm gonna check on that, because she's hearing some strange things from people. But that's good to know. I'll tell her that that's a vicious rumor, not true.
The next question was about not really related, sort of related, about after school programs. And I know that there was a concern among Albert Bridge parents that the Windsor Rec program was not adhering to any sort of masking protocol. And I wondered what the outcome of the, there's been the same sort of feeling in Windsor, whether the, Jennifer, whether the survey that was sent out had led to any conclusions, and what's going on with that?
So I can speak for Albert Bridge. We don't have any control over the rec center, nor do we have control over what parents do after school, right? But we did try and pull together a parents group to gather some data, and I have a parent in the school who's taking lead on trying to organize possible after school gatherings where the grouping is less intermingled with other cohorts in other schools. But that's still in process.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Elizabeth, Jennifer is absolutely right that we don't have control over after-school programs. They are accessed by parents by choice. I've certainly had conversations with the recreation director, James. I mean, he's certainly trying to adhere to his guidelines. He has different guidelines in after-school program than we have in public schooling. And we've had those conversations. And we've had some similar complaints from Windsor parents as well, but we tend to send them to James because he runs that program.
I certainly don't have any. I think it's great that James is running the program, and I'm positive that I speak for a huge swath of the community in expressing gratitude.
Yeah,
that program exists. And so I apologize if I worded that in such a way that made it sound as if I was not grateful for the program. I really was talking about the parent concerns about the masking.
Kate and Colleen or Jennifer, do we still have a fair number of kids? I think at one point we were in the 40 range, 45 range.
Yeah, I think it's 42. There's a wait list of 5 kids right now. Not everyone, not all 42 on that list though, access it every day. Some do every other week, some do 2 days a week, some do 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that there's 42 kids there at once, but like you said, that's James's wheelhouse.
No, it was very nice of him to do that, and it's helped a lot of kids who might not have a place to go. It's not very proximate to some of our other schools, and he can only handle so many, but he did a great job opening it up.
Yeah, that was very good of him. Okay. There's just a couple of little things left, I swear. I just wanted to check in with VTVLC and distance learning and what is going on with distance learning, and whether we're having whether we're now 5 weeks into the school year. Are we going to have distance learning in the afternoons, and are all high school students fully engaged in their distance learning? So.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Angie take this one, but I want to just separate out that there really are three different venues for distance learning, right? One are those students who are 100% remote. And those kids don't ever come to in-person instruction, and Angie is supervising those teachers and that program. And I think she'll tell you, that's a little bit of a challenge, but it's happening. The second is what Elizabeth mentioned, and that is the afternoon for the in-person students. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, we did not have any interaction or distance learning happening in the afternoons. We are now, at least within the last couple of weeks, to answer your question, Elizabeth, we're cranking that up. But I'll let Angie maybe speak, or the administrator speak more specifically. What I will tell you is, from a logistical standpoint and a contractual standpoint, once the students leave our building, our teachers are still contractually entitled to a duty-free lunch, because they're with those kids every second of every day. And they're also entitled to a planning period. So there's a period of time after the kids leave that, because the teachers haven't gotten those things during the day, that has to happen. But that still leaves about an hour in the afternoon for check-in with kids and tutorial and intervention and some lesson planning. But that should have started. So the third venue is what you mentioned also, Elizabeth. That's the high school students, who have historically had some level of distance learning already. We had several of our students who were partaking in virtual high school classes and dual enrollment classes, online and offline and in person. So we've had those flexible pathways at the high school level for a while. So again, Angie, or Colleen or Kate can speak to this, but I would say that of all three of those venues, the ones who are the most engaged are the high school students, because they actually have classes, real live online classes in the afternoon, either through virtual high school or through our own teachers who are teaching those online classes. And they are scheduled in, they've got 3 blocks in the morning, and most of them have 3 blocks in the afternoon. So that's, I just want to make sure we understood this. A whole lot of different kinds of distant learning. But Angie, do you want to talk a little bit about how you think VTVLC is going, and what are the challenges and successes?
So we are actually at week 5.5. So this is our 6th week. And last week, so I'm speaking for remote only. I'll let Colleen and Kate talk about how the afternoon remote learning is going in their buildings, in their building. And so last week I had 5 families request to return to in-person. And there is a process that we have to follow, and that's not always doable, because we're practicing the distancing in the classrooms, and many of our classrooms are maxed, and we can't take more children in there. So that's been a challenge. Usually it's, let's talk with the teacher. Let's find out how we can support those students to be successful in remote only learning. Probably no surprise to you this week, based on the information that was happening over the weekend, we had some in-person families request to be remote only. Again, that I explain it to families that it's like transferring your child from Wethersfield to Heartland, or maybe from Wethersfield to Springfield, because remote only is its own school, because our teachers they're not the teachers that are in the buildings. They are SU teachers. But I just want to make sure that that's clear. Anybody that's listening to this, that this is something that they're thinking about if they're remote only or they're in person. Even though we are using the VTVLC curriculum, the scope and sequence, what is happening in the buildings is different than what is happening in remote only. In remote only, our teachers have many students, and they are following the VTVLC curriculum with more fidelity than what's happening in the building, because in the building, we are emphasizing what's happening in person learning. We want our kids to know how to use the VTVLC in the event that we might have to go remote with those students, but we're really emphasizing in-person instruction and activities and things like that for students to build their understanding that way. And the interdisciplinary units are also happening in person. That is not happening in the remote only option. So we did ask families to make a semester-long commitment. We will revisit the remote only in December to see what's happening. The semester ends mid-January. So definitely by Christmas break, we ought to know if what's happening with remote, and there will be an option, whether or not we can accommodate an option to return to in-person. So that's all. Does anybody have any questions about remote only? Okay. And Colleen and Kate, I'll let you talk about
Colleen, Kate, and actually Jennifer, I think, the three of you could.
For in-person.
Yeah, I would like to say that our VTVLC classes are all up and running. It's just that what is grade level appropriate, and what, especially with some of our younger students, what the VTVLC expectations are. As Angie said, we're working on a lot of in-person activities and hands-on, and not trying to use a lot of screen time, just allowing them to understand how to use VTVLC if we were to go totally remote. But the learning curve of catching students up who never used VTVLC in a scope and sequence before and may not be at exactly the same space. So for our younger students, we're doing traditional hands-on learning and what our teachers do best, with an understanding for our students and families how the VTVLC works, so that we could fall back on that and understand how to use that and be in the sequence as best we can that's grade appropriate. Our teachers are now beginning to add hours in the afternoon for student enrichment, struggling students, office hours, different ways to access our students in the afternoon. That is between the teacher teams and the families, and how they're reaching out to those students for some online afternoon learning after the 12:30 dismissal. Kate, do you want to talk about the high school?
So the high school remote is kind of its own separate thing. So we have the K-12 in person, then Angie's doing the K-8 remote, then Colleen and I are doing the 9-12 remote. So traditionally at Windsor, you could access remote classes. I think currently we have about 47 kids who are doing the all remote. Of those kids, the majority of them come from the 9th grade. Of the 9th graders that come, the majority of those are students who've actually never stepped foot in Windsor School because they're tuition students. So I wanted to give a kudos to Greg and his comrade Jessica, who noticed that those kids did have the need for the IDL, and they have created a virtual IDL to welcome those students and to connect them to their classmates. This has been a struggle for some of our kids and some of our families. So we've been working closely with Kim Gogan and Bridget Ferriel. So they've kind of spearheaded all the kids that are doing ed options classes who don't have a connection with a Windsor teacher because they're fully remote. And we have a meeting every week, and they report back to us on what they've done to reach out to these kids, to reach out to their families, to connect to ed options. And the rate they give the people that should be on our radar to us, what Colleen was really smart enough to think of was that our truancy policy was set on 30 missed class periods. So that would trigger that was 5 full days. But if she switched that to 15 periods, that was showing us all the kids who were just blowing off their remote classes. So we've been sending the letters home and talking to the families now if they've missed 15 remote classes as opposed to 30 full classes. Because if you're missing only your remote, now you're going to be in trouble quickly with those classes. So those are a couple of kinks that we've worked out along the way. It hasn't been seamless, but everyone is working really hard and coming up with these ideas like Greg and Jessica and Colleen as we go.
And with the VHS and the ed options that our high school students have always had access to with a different online teacher, as Kate said, our flexible pathways coordinator and our MTSS coordinator, Bridget Ferriel and Kim Gogan, have really taken on a huge role in being that liaison between the online classes and our teachers here. And our counselors have done everything they could to connect high school students with our own teachers first, if at all possible. So the relationships we're still working on them remotely. It is difficult. And as Kate said, we are trying to pinpoint when the remote classes specifically are being missed versus the in-person, and trying to make time in our school day for the students who are half and half in that hybrid to get some of that support that they might need from the afternoon teachers when they don't get to see them.
We also have brought in a couple of full remote students just for a day to kind of get them situated in person with, this is what your classes look like, this is how you access VT-VLC, because they never had that luxury. So if that's been a problem, we've had them come in for a one-on-one session again with Greg and Jessica. As Angie pointed out, it is not that easy to transfer someone from remote to in-person, but it's also just as difficult to have someone go from remote to online only. There's about a 2-week lag period to get them set up into VT-VLC. And we tell parents that right from the start when they make that request, that we need 2 weeks to make that happen.
I see a note in the chat window that from Catherine Allen. Do either one of you know Catherine?
Yeah, I think that the question is a good question. I mean, we have not met at length with Catherine, but I know that her question is, how does she get her oldest child who is on an IEP to get enrolled in other classes other than art now that we're in week 5.5 of school, despite my emails to staff. So I think and I think I might have had a conversation with Catherine. I've had a couple of conversations over the last couple of weeks, and part of it is making that contact now that we are in week 5 and figuring that out. So certainly what I would say to Catherine is be persistent, continue to reach out to, if your student's on an IEP. Katie Ahern's on the call tonight. That's been a challenge, getting those kids scheduled in the afternoons and getting their support scheduled in the afternoons. But I would say you as a parent have the right to call an IEP meeting anytime you want to call one. So, and Catherine and Katie, I don't know whether you want to add to that.
I guess my question would be, it's about high school, getting enrolled in the high school classes, and so Kat, maybe we should give a call tomorrow and we could see how to track this down. Would be because that's a enrollment issue of getting into classes. So, and I think Greg's kind of nodding his head too. So, let's see how we can figure out where the hiccup is.
Yeah, we're going to assume it's a high school student. I mean, obviously, we wouldn't talk in a lot of detail at a public meeting about a particular student, but we can assume it's a high school student. And I know in the afternoons that there's a lot more being offered than art. So there's no reason we shouldn't be able to work something like that out. But, you know, you can reach out to me, Catherine, you can reach out to Katie Ahern, and we can take a look at that. Now that we're in, I would tell you the first 3 weeks, it was a little bit confusing, but now that we're in week 5, I think we should be able to work something like that out.
And, Jennifer?
So for us, particularly in regards to remote learning, we have about 20% of our kids who are not able to access any type of remote learning in the afternoon. So our teachers are hesitant to start anything new using VTVLC because during the day they're doing the interdisciplinary units for roughly 70 minutes of the morning with math, and ELA is the expectation for 40 minutes of the other 2 slots. So VTVLC, while we're moving ahead, we're looking at the scope and sequence, but for the first 6 weeks of school, our staff had already planned back in June to do an interdisciplinary unit based on responsive classrooms for 6 weeks of school. So we didn't have any of the VTVLC at all identified then. And so instead of asking them to throw all that work out and try and do something right there in the moment when we're starting up school, we decided to stick with the plan that we had made. So we're moving into looking at the scope and sequence as we move to our next rotation for our specials, which is starting next week. And as far as our interdisciplinary work, our specialists, when I met with them, are really excited about being embedded in the classroom and the ability to watch other teachers teach. So it's in a way, this is a win-win for them because we know one of the best ways to learn to become better teachers is to do that. And so they're excited about that process. However, we're still feeling a lot like it's more integrated instead of interdisciplinary. So instead of the 2 being kind of partners in developing based on the standards, it's more like the teachers got the idea and then the specialist comes in and sees how they can support, but they're still very happy doing that. So in the afternoon we have, and as far as our academic interventionist, I believe that is 100% scheduled with students. Our special education crew looks like it's about 85% fully scheduled in terms of getting everybody the needs met that can access the needs. Our counseling is, I think, gosh, I want to say this morning, he said it's about 30% to 40% fully scheduled. Our SEL crew, the rest of them are pretty close to fully scheduled at this point. We still have some outside people who aren't in our building or outside of our organizations that we're still trying to work with, like We Are Hope, our mentoring and those kinds of things for afternoon, what I need time. That might be, so we're also starting enrichment. So instead of band, we're doing lessons. I think that's it for data for now.
Jennifer, are they starting something remote next week, are you saying?
So some of them have already started. It depends on what the teacher has scheduled for the individual student. So if it's a student who can access, then they are setting up specific times to meet with students or small groups based on what their needs are. There is no new learning that is happening in the afternoon because we would be missing about 20 to 25% of our kids. And that doesn't feel okay for us. So we're really focusing on it being our what I need time. So we've got interventions for those who need extra supports and enrichment for those who are ready to move forward and do extra things. That's where we're going. But the idea is each teacher's either connecting with parents for the little younger kids to have conversations about what the kid's working on and to help them set up sort of afternoon activities that are meaningful. And then the older kids, there's some independent work, as I understand, being sent home depending on the teacher. There is, teachers are setting up specific times to meet with students during the week, and that is not fully flushed out. And I don't even have good data on how many have finished that based on my spreadsheet doesn't have good information on that. But hopefully they've already started to an extent.
Yeah. And one of the challenges, Nancy, and that's why I think this is a great question and why it has to be so individual in terms of how you get that access in the afternoon. For example, not all of our kids at 12:30, 1 o'clock are going home. Some of them are going to childcares. Some of them are going to the rec center. Some of them are going to a grandparent's house and with no access to internet. So you almost really do have to individualize this support, and it either has to be, a choice board where the student's investing in something that's enriching, or it has to be some level of intervention because a student is really struggling. And I'll tell you, that part has not been easy to schedule.
Thank you very much for that. Oh, sorry.
I have a question. Is there any, what are we waiting for to go full day?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nancy. First of all, we are waiting for the state to put out some new guidelines about what this phase 3 really means. We're also waiting for some of the restrictions to be loosened, because one of the reasons we're going partial day is because the students and staff, quite frankly, get very fatigued when they have to wear masks all day or have to, be in these pods all day. So that's part of it. But the administrative team just today started to talk about reconvening that reopening task force once those guidelines are back out, and having that conversation about, I don't know about full day, but certainly extending the day. Because remember, we have these kids in pods. We have them building relationships with adults. Those are great relationships. And one of the things we don't want to do is upset that apple cart. So, and at the same time, if they're going to be in these pods, we have to make sure that the contractual obligations are met for duty-free lunch and planning periods for teachers. So I think it's going to be that reopening task force getting back together again once the guidelines are posted and talking about it. The administrative team just had that conversation this morning, and whether that would be incremental, whether we'd extend a half an hour or 45 minutes to start and see how that goes, understanding that we still have to make sure that the professional teachers and the paras get the breaks that they deserve and that they are contractually obligated to. So it's not a simple question, but it's a good question, Nancy.
Thank you for the updates. We have one more agenda item, which is Trauma Transform Champions update, but I'm going to bump that to our next meeting because it's awfully late. And I don't think, I'm not sure that my brain could hold any information that's trying to be transferred to it at the moment. So,
yeah. But one thing before we bump that, though, I do with respect to that issue, I want to shout out to the champions and Jennifer Aldrich, who has kept those champions alive and well with Dave Melnick. She's done an enormous amount of work. So I'd like to really highlight that on our next agenda, so she could give you that update.
That's right. I don't want to rush through it.
I agree.
Mind, Jennifer, waiting until the next.
Happy to do it.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Past bedtime.
Past my bedtime.
What's
It's past my bedtime.
Yeah, it's quite past your bedtime. All right, I will take a motion to approve all of the minutes that have been sent to us.
So moved.
Second.
Chris seconds.
Second.
All those in favor of approving all of the minutes which have been sent to us, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays or any abstentions? Okay. Then all the minutes have been passed. And let's see, we've got future agenda items, which will include the trauma champions.
I think the budget has to be on there.
Budget will be on there. The SRO with the police officer.
Yeah.
The budget intended to plan together and COVID updates. Hopefully that'll be
That'll be a healthy agenda. No pun intended.
all right. I'll take a motion to end this behemoth of a meeting.
Hey, you did a great job for all those
So
items.
moved.
Second.
Hey, Bill, could you?
It doesn't normally run this long. I swear.
And remember that recording is going to.
Wait, can I just say a side note before you leave? The students did email back that they do want to be part of this, but they're concerned about the length of the meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't normally go. I swear it doesn't normally go this long.
So they would like to just come to portions. And if you could work that out. I'll send that an email tomorrow, but I thought it was funny because I was thinking, right on, kids, right on.
They're saying what we're all thinking. That's good. And Elizabeth, remember the recording is going to come to you. That's editable and uploadable. So, you know, kind of what you're doing there. And then Bill Yates, is he with us or did he leave?
I think he already left.
He left. I was going to ask him to stay on for a minute, but so much for that. I'll touch base with him tomorrow.
Okay. Did we vote on ending the meeting? Yes.
I thought we did. Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody. See you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. See you in the morning.